All right. If nothing, we're either live or we're not live. This is an experiment. You are listening to the DMZ America podcast for Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. It's the day after the election, and I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall coming to you from the left.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis coming to you from the right. What a night.
Oh, what a night. Late September 1960. Yeah. So it was a night. It was a night, indeed. So
yes.
First of all, I would like to claim my beer that we bet.
Yes.
We did bet a quality beer, and that beer is mine.
Of your choice.
A beer of my choice, which I will have.
It can be gold-laced.
And it may
water.
be. It may well be. So yeah, we Scott and I had both predicted. In fairness, I can't really jump up and down on the corpse of the people who predicted differently, because I basically hedged my bets and I said this could go either way, and it was anybody's guess which way it could go. It was super tight. We obviously now know that Donald Trump will be the 47th, as well as the 45th president of the United States. The U.S. Senate will be at least a 52-seat majority for the Republican Party, maybe as high as 55. There's still votes being tallied to figure that out. The House of Representatives is completely up in the air. Analysts had predicted earlier that it might flip over to the Democrats. That could still happen, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more moving parts there, so we don't really know what's happening there. But there's no question about it. Donald Trump had an amazing night. Let's recap. This is a man who left office in disgrace 2 weeks after the January 6th uprising and the Capitol riot, or insurrection, if you will. He was impeached not once, but twice, the only American president to have been impeached twice. He was convicted of 34 felony counts in a New York courtroom. He was dunned $500 million in court fines by a New York judge over business fraud. A civil court hit him up for over $100 million of damages related to sexual assault against E. Jean Carroll. He said and did a million intemperate things. There's still other lawsuits and other litigation. He was charged with RICO. He was indicted. There's a mugshot of him. And this man, who has never served in political office before becoming president or served in the military, the only American president who we can say that to, has now been reelected by a healthy electoral college margin. We're not really sure about the total popular vote tally, but it looks like he'll probably squeak out a popular vote victory.
It's not a squeak, Ted. As of just a few minutes ago, he was up by 7 million votes. That's not a squeak.
That's a bigger margin than Joe Biden defeated him by. That was 79 to 75 million tally in 2020.
And if the numbers hold up, fewer people voted, and fewer Democrats, which tells you
that plays into the Ted Rall narrative, as you know.
It does. It does.
Which all things always do. All right. So,
Of course.
It's my world. Clovis only lives in it. Okay, so let's break it down. How did we get here? Who's to blame? I think it's not too early to start the blame game. And then, what does a Trump administration look like? How long does it last? There's a lot of questions. Let's start with, how did we get here? How did Donald Trump win? I guess this is tied into the blame, right? So that's like a combination. So how do we achieve this result?
I think there's a couple of things, but and stuff that is not being reported by the mainstream media, which is why you listen to the DMZ America podcast, because Ted and I see things most people don't, and we or won't report it. Ted, last night, a good friend of mine, one of my oldest friends, texted me and says, "Finally, the year of the man." He's a Trump supporter, and I was kind of take it back, but you and I have touched on this, and we've never done the type of deep dive we should, and we will in the future. But when you have an entire political party, the Democratic Party, and the mainstream media effectively saying men, especially white straight men, sit down and shut up, your day is over. Well, that doesn't go over so well. It's a lousy campaign slogan. And so that's one of the things that no one's reporting. I mean, I was obviously reading all the reports, and no one's mentioning that. I think that's a huge, highly underreported part of this election. Where's the blame game? The Democratic Party this is 2016. I mean, it feels like 2016. The numbers look like 2016. The electoral map looks like 2016. And quite frankly, you had a candidate who you and I postulated that based on some reports that Kamala Harris was taking advice from Hillary Clinton. And this feels like that same kind of campaign, and it had the same kind of result. And here we are. I also think that, on practical terms, now, you see the mainstream media, well, it was the economy. It was, the inflation, the hangover from COVID and the pandemic. And it's like, the economy was part of it. But I think there's a lot of deep-seated, deep-rooted issues that no one's digging into. And Ted, I know that you have some ideas on this as well, but mine is, first and foremost, this is the bros revenge. I go, no, it's just, you can't castigate an entire 50% of the population and expect them then to turn around and vote for you. It looks very much, I keep referring back to 2016, like far fewer Democrats voted than Republicans. I went voting yesterday. I live here in Alabama, so it's a very, very red state, and I live in a very red district. And there was a line. It took me over an hour and 10 minutes to vote. And apparently that was short compared to what the morning line was like. To unpack the numbers over the next few days, it's going to be fascinating, especially the exit polls and who voted for what. But when you have Latino men voting for Donald Trump, when you have African-American men voting for Donald Trump, the Democratic Party has to go back and retool. I mean, they are in desperate, dire straits because down ticket stuff, it looks very much like they're going to take the House. Right. Currently, as of this podcast, the Republicans are up by 20 seats. I mean, this could be an actual, not a razor thin margin in the House, but giving them a little wiggle room. So, Ted, what's your take on all this? I'm dying to know what your takeaways are.
Well, I mean, so I think that some of this was conventional wisdom, right? I mean, if Harris had prevailed, she would have been the first candidate in the modern era to come to have incumbent numbers for the classic Gallup poll question: what direction is the country moving in? And to overcome a negative, to be underwater on that, and then to win re-election. Effectively, she was running for re-election. Trump was, yes, obviously he was president before, but he was the challenger. She didn't beat that. When the American people feel that the country is moving in the wrong direction, and that can be an airy, ethereal metric and hard to nail down, they tend not to return you to power. Now, I've already heard spinning on the part on NPR by Democratic operatives saying Kamala Harris didn't do anything wrong. She couldn't have done anything differently. She campaigned beautifully. Now, that's clearly not true. And there's a million things that went wrong. Let me just say, I like to take things chronologically. First and foremost, what went wrong was Joe Biden decided to run for re-election. That shouldn't have happened and shouldn't have been allowed to happen. After the 2022 midterms, the DNC should have put the kibosh on it and told the president, if you want to run for re-election, you can do it, but you will not have the support of the party. That should just not have been allowed. Then going a little further back in 2020, Biden decided to, knowing that he was 78 years old, the oldest man to ever take the oath of office, he appointed a vice presidential running mate who he knew was a weak candidate, a weak politician, had only gotten 0.6% of the vote in the Democratic primary, did not light the Democratic base on fire, and would not likely be able to govern effectively if something were to happen to him. And at his age, it was never going to be more likely that something happened to a sitting president than him. And it did. He wasn't able to finish. Right. So choosing, when you're that old, it's political malpractice to choose a vice president who isn't tip top and able to step in and run for reelection, right? Like, I mean, like I think of an able choice would be someone like JFK. Something happened to him. He picked wisely. Someone who was able to govern and to be reelected easily.
Ronald Reagan. George H.W. Bush.
Also an excellent choice. So
yeah,
she was not an excellent choice. I think I heard people crowing a couple days ago when they all thought that she was going to win, that he was going to go down as one of the great political minds of his generation, because this was his way of finagling the first woman of color into the Oval Office. Well, that didn't work, right? And
really?
so that's a
good Lord.
And I don't know. Maybe that we don't know what he was thinking, but so
I think we all know what he was thinking. I like pudding.
Not pudding, much. Really. He wasn't thinking about much.
Pudding's good.
Look, I think then you add a lot of other stuff to it. Some things, like there was a general, Kamala Harris was not tempered through a rigorous primary process that would have caused her to maybe shine. She again will blame Biden. Biden didn't let her have a front and center role in the administration, knowing that almost certainly she was going to be needing to run for president in this cycle. Or he should have given her a lot to do in front of the cameras. He never did. She had a truncated campaign. I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think they planned it that way. They had 107 days to campaign. She squandered 40 of them. Okay. She did. It's basically, this should have been balls to the wall. And basically for 40 days, she hid out from the press and didn't do much at all. Remember, she only had one debate. I bet she's regretting that decision now. She didn't have hardly any real challenging press interviews. I'm sure she's regretting that now. They also, this was an identity politics campaign. I know she didn't talk about it herself, but all her surrogates went out there and did it for her. And basically, like you alluded to, Scott, the campaign, Michelle Obama, figures like that, they kept trying to guilt dudes into voting for her. And basically it felt like a duty. You said yourself, turnout was very disappointing. Interestingly, among Latino men, Black men writ large, men didn't like it. Now, did sexism and misogyny play a role? Probably. I mean, they're a real factor in our culture and in our politics. But
yes,
but the point is, this is kind of like Hillary Clinton complaining about the Electoral College, as if she'd never heard of it when she started running for president. It's like no one knows about sexism and misogyny more than women. She certainly should have known that this was going to be a major factor, and she accounted for it in part. But there should have been a full-on dude offensive, and there wasn't. The choice of there was the alienation of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Normally, when there's primaries, the winner runs left, then they run to the center in the general. Well, there were no primaries, so she never ran left. So there was never any wink to the progressive base. Don't worry, I'm one of you. We just knew her as a tough on crime prosecutor who liked to send innocent Black men to death row. And suddenly now she's running as a hardcore war hawk, someone who's supports Israel and Gaza no matter what, someone who's now in favor of a tough immigration policy, maybe even building the wall. And then last and certainly not least was I had been saying this all along, and I think this is what ended up happening. It came down to a devil you know versus a devil you don't know election. And she was, as of yesterday, at the close of the polls, still a devil that many of the American people felt that they didn't know well enough to trust with the launch codes. They hadn't seen her do anything real and serious. She didn't seem to have any credible policies. Also, I forget which politician it was. It said, if you try to out-Republican the Republicans, the voters will vote for the real Republican every time. I think that's what happened here, too. People wanted, she tried to out-Republican the Republicans by campaigning with someone from the extreme right, Liz Cheney. She appeared with Liz Cheney more than anyone else. Oh, I should not also I really should hat tip Van Jones and David Axelrod, who both said that they got queasy feelings in the closing days of the campaign. And to their credit, they said this before the election results were announced, when they saw these glitzy campaign appearances with Lady Gaga and Bruce Springsteen and all these celebrities and all the razzmatazz and the flash, and how that was likely to turn off working class voters. Donald Trump gives a rally, and it has the feel of a party, right? But it's a party that you could go to. It's a party that you feel like you might be invited to. It's a free party. Anybody can go to a Trump rally. The Democrats they came off as coastal elites. They're having a wild party. You're not invited to the party. This is like in school on Monday morning when the mean girl comes to your class and says, "I had such a great party. Everyone was there," and you're like, "I wasn't there." Or like the rich kids come back from the ski lodge with their ski pass
right
at the bottom of and you're like, "I didn't get to go skiing. I spent the weekend shoveling snow." And that's, I think, like the message that was sent out, not just to working class people, but to people like me who used to be working class. And and I think a lot of people don't like it. It was bad optics. And I think there was it's a perfect storm. There's 1,000 bad things that happened in this campaign. I couldn't disagree more with the idea that there weren't things that she could have done better.
Oh, that's absurd, because and there's no such thing as a perfect campaign. I also think, and he's not being mentioned at all this morning, and that's current President Joe Biden's comments about the only garbage I see are Trump voters.
Not good.
Or Trump supporters. And it's like, that is the last thing that needed to be said for the I mean, she was trying to thread the needle. And they still think that the Democrats think that this is 1992. Mm-hmm. And Carville, famously said, "We didn't storm the White House, we picked the lock." And they did. And but they also had the advantage of running against then incumbent President George H.W. Bush, who didn't seem all that engaged or really interested in maintaining and keeping the office. So the Democrats weren't facing that this time. You touched on something, and you've brought this up, and we've never delved into it. It's probably a subject for another podcast, but the man problem. Mm-hmm. And we have a big one, and you codify it with numbers. But if you could touch on it, just kind of bring those numbers up, because I know you have it on the tip of your brain. But the man problem is it's a big issue for the Democratic Party.
It is. Look, it's a big problem for the United States. Men and boys are half the population, and they're falling behind very badly. It starts out in childhood, where boys have by far the highest rate of delinquency and dropout from junior high school and high school. It also, the highly feminized education system, where the vast majority of teachers are women, administrators are women, and they crack down on like boisterous boys in a way that it does, sends the message that education is for girls. It's not for boys. It's not a place where boys can seek and find success in a way that didn't used to happen. The rates of drug addiction and suicide are higher starting in teen years for boys than they are for girls. That continues throughout adulthood, all the way till death. You have the opioid epidemic that has absolutely devastated, particularly, obviously there are women who suffer from it too, but it's much worse for men. I think maybe the number one most shocking statistic is that 58% of college students in the United States are women. Okay, so that means two out of three college kids is a girl. Now there's a benefit to going to college. College graduates earn more money than non-college graduates, so that's destiny. And it goes on to, not everybody, okay, but on average. And so they end up going to so then, and it's because we still have cultural norms where trophy wives are a thing, but trophy husbands are not a thing. So rich women, women who are successful, don't want to quote unquote date down. So you end up with basically a declining birth rate because you have a mismatch between men and women. You have poverty as women's wages have increased pretty steadily over the last 40 years, but men's have declined steadily at the same time. Most men generally have a sense that their fortunes are fading away, and it's coming, that all of the main gains of feminism are coming at their expense, and they're not really wrong. That's basically true. And the thing is that there's not any, just not only are men being told that their problems aren't important, they're being told that they should be happy about it, that they should shut the fuck up and take it, because after all, this is a society, which is true, that has had systemic sexism, misogyny, sexual violence for forever. And so I think that a lot of guys after a certain point are like thinking, well, I didn't benefit or do any of that stuff. So why am I paying the price for the sins of my, it's kind of like the angry white man phenomenon of 30 years ago. Like, why am I paying for slavery? I didn't fucking own any slaves. And in fact, my family wasn't even here, until after 1865. Right. So there's basically the main problem is that boys and men have been left behind by feminism, and they've been seething with resentment. And now I suspect a lot of them went into voting booths and maybe told their wives, oh, I totally voted for Kamala. And then maybe not so much.
On a side note, again, digging into the stuff and addressing issues that nobody's going to in the, in the coming days, you and I both know there's going to be recriminations, and not least of which is going to be against Jill Stein. How dare she run? She stole, if she had not run. First of all, the gap now, the numbers between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, just the raw numbers. For the first time in a number of years, we're going to have a president who was actually elected with a majority of the vote, which is kind of nice.
That is nice.
It is. I mean, it kind of feels like 2008 when Obama finally won, and we had two elections in a row where the winner did not win the popular vote, although Joe Biden did, didn't he? By quite a bit. This is. I was going off on the side issue, which now has totally escaped me because I'm old and it's early. God, I love this on my own brain. But let's go to this, Ted, on another thing, on the a progressive wing, and how Kamala, this is, I was going to mention third parties. You can't blame Jill Stein. Okay, folks, all of you out there who are saying, how dare she? Her numbers were equal to those of Chase Oliver, who did appear on this podcast. And I think we're the ones who kind of pushed him forward and gave him that mighty 1%.
That's no question about
it. But she kind of ran neck and neck in a lot of states and garnered the same number of votes. My point is that you can't, because libertarians would traditionally vote Republican if they didn't have a libertarian candidate. And I would suspect Green Party voters would vote for the Democrats given the choice, if there was no Green Party candidate to vote for. So it's a push. So I'm saying to our listeners out there, don't be fooled and don't be tricked into the how in 2016 and Hillary complaining about Stein and how that stole the election from her. It didn't. There's no stealing in any serious sense, no stealing of elections. Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate. Mm-hmm. She was a terrible candidate in 2020. She was a terrible candidate today. That's why they lost. And, Ted, I'm not sure how much you're seeing of this, of the mainstream media going like, oh my God, they're gnashing of teeth. 2 times they've had the chance to elect women, and 2 times they voted against them.
Yeah, well, maybe maybe don't choose shitty ones, right? I mean, honestly,
well, 2016,
they're gonna argue that Trump is a shitty man, and they're not wrong. But
no,
again, but like seriously, come on, you can think of any number of women candidates who could have prevailed here. I mean, Elizabeth Warren,
Governor Whitmer from Michigan would have been an excellent choice. This is 2016 all over again. I mean, it really is writ large, and it's the same reasons, the same problems, the same issues, and the same result. Actually, more so for the Republicans. Now we're entering waters where, you know, it looks like, well, we're definitely going to have a Republican Senate.
Mhm.
It looks to me, if I looking at the numbers, if they look and continue the way they're looking, you're going to have a Republican House, you have a Republican Supreme Court, and you have Donald Trump in charge.
Mhm.
This
Right.
is a prescription. You know, you're talking to a guy who's a Republican, but the thing is, Trumpism is not conservatism. It's very different, and it flies in the face of many conservative principles. But one last thing, Ted, before, post-mortem on the Harris campaign, the progressive wing, they did to the progressive wing here in 2024 that happened to the progressives in 2016. They got, what's the word I'm looking for, Ted? Fucked. That's the word.
Mhm.
With Bernie, being, and the Clintons using their ownership of the DNC, denied him a clear and honest shot at the nomination. Harris ran away from the progressives, didn't
Mhm.
even throw them a bone. I have to believe that I mean, look at Donald Trump. All you have to do is look at the guy you're running against, who has no qualms about embracing, some of the more extreme views of the Republican Party. Why? I don't understand why she didn't. Why she didn't throw the progressives like yourself and others a bone. I mean, just
Right.
when she's asked, what, what did you, during the interview, what would you do differently than President Biden? Now we're all human beings and we're all different.
A lot of
I
people
mean,
in exit polls said that they did not like the fact that she couldn't answer and did not answer that question. They wanted,
yes,
it's a change election. The electorate is grumpy and grouchy. And more so, right? They're angry. They're pissed off. I think, there was joy on the stage she was having a good time, but we're not having a good time. And it's, so I think that's in the end, like what did her in was just like she didn't connect with like it was really interesting. A lot of the coverage of Trump came down to, God, he's so angry. His vision is so dark and apocalyptic and bleak, American decline. And it was like thinking, okay, but that might be an exaggeration, or actually it might not be. And the thing is that but obviously the mood of the public was closer to him than to her. Basically everything's basically okay. We talk about throwing bones to the progressives, right? What would that have looked like? Okay, the minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 since 2009. I think we can all agree that it should go up, except for maniacs. So if she had just said, it's time to increase the minimum wage, and really made that, like she said it once in passing, but to really truly make that a part of her platform, I think, most Americans could have gotten behind that, considering that more Americans are supportive of unions than have ever been in recent years, for example.
yeah.
And all the recent strikes have ended favorably for the strikers, with the even the rail strike kind of ended with a pretty good contract. So I think she could have done that. She could have said something about college costs being too high. She could have said, a lot of people are looking for a Ted Rall thing. I've been pounding away at the need for a national jobs retraining program for people who are displaced from professions like editorial cartooning that don't exist anymore. I mean, seriously, Scott, you and I should be able to say, look, we were professional editorial cartoonists. Our profession is no more. We would like to go to community college or even a 4-year school and get and train for something that's better for the 21st century. We should be able to do that. They should cut off a little bit, send Zelensky a little bit fewer bombs, and and pay for that, right? And I think, again, Democrats and Republicans alike, voters could get behind it. I bet Republicans, you could get bipartisan action in the U.S. Congress on that, because this would disproportionately help the red states where they're most affected by deindustrialization.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of things like that she could have done. The idea that, she was running as a rabid right winger, like, I want America to have the most lethal military force. I don't want us to have the most lethal military force. I want us to have the best military force, the strongest military force. Lethal is bloodthirsty and scary. It makes you sound like Bibi Netanyahu. There's just like, and then, it's like, I guess the big takeaway here is that a lot of progressives, they just sat on their hands, as we did in 2016. And it'll be really interesting to see what the final tally is for third-party candidates Cornel West and Jill Stein. I think it'll probably be the highest it's been for a long time. And, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if the total was like 3 points or 2.5 points there. Howie Hawkins only got 0.2% in the last cycle. So a lot went wrong. And, and also, I got to say that another big mistake that the establishment made was laying it on Donald Trump so thick. They went on and on and on and on in the media. And obviously there was all the lawfare against him in the courts. A lot of it, you and I both know, was coordinated at the very highest levels of the government and the media and the judiciary establishment. They went after him like crazy. And, there were some interesting polls that showed that, for example, young black men identified with this rich, old, white asshole from New York because they were like, we know what it's like to get to be on the wrong side of the law. And he knows what it's like to be on the wrong side of the law. He's not being treated fairly. We know what it's like not to be treated fairly. I think he would probably currently, just think about it. They cornered him. They made him run for president. If they had not charged him with all this shit, he might have just said, fuck it, I'm out. I'm out of public life. He had to run and win to stay out of jail. This is basic Sun Tzu and Machiavelli. Don't corner your enemy and make him desperate. That's what they did. It was really, they just came, and they came on too fast and thick, and their entire campaign came down to, you can't vote for Trump. He'll destroy democracy. Scott, is he going to destroy democracy? Are we going to see jackbooted thugs marching through the streets? And that's a serious question.
Yeah, not like that. Looking at what's next, I think this is a vital question now, because you're going to have Trump unchained. He's not unfettered legislatively. He's going to have, a House. He's going to have a Senate. Does this mean it's the end of democracy? It's not like it's going to be Nazi Germany. It's not like it's going to be Mussolini. It's not. You're not going to have, fascist Spain. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be different. And by different, here's what I see going forward. All the whims of the people around Donald Trump. Donald Trump is old. He's doddering. You can tell from his speech patterns. He's slurring. He is not mentally sharp anymore. So look at the people around him. That's what's going to perpetuate the legislative and the government going forward. So how does this look? Look at Hungary. He mentions the leader of Hungary with great affection, and that's the model for America going forward. Not a single shot was fired in Hungary. Mm-hmm. No one was sent to a camp. No one was disappeared. They just did it by getting rid of a media that covered them, an objective media that covered them, and by doing that, they didn't get rid of it by breaking the presses. They just said, you can't believe these guys. And the press very handily said, yeah, you really can't. Here are many reasons why. Not least, the Russian collusion story from 2016 is a perfect example of how they perpetuated a story that they knew to be untrue and continued to report it. And then it comes out that they did this from legitimate sources like the Columbia Journalism Review. This is a long answer to a short question. Are we headed toward, is democracy in trouble? It is. And I think normalcy is done. The normalcy as we were taught to believe that it was. How's that? Those days are done. You're going to have, a vengeful president. How many, and this is going to be a real test this time around, is just how strong the Constitution is. Can they stop him from, his worst instincts? That's where the danger comes, Ted. And also the worst instincts of the people he surrounds himself with. Now you are literally going to have a White House where Elon Musk and RFK Jr. have access and have the ear of the president.
I don't really know. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think that I don't really have a problem with that. I'm not that worried about it. I mean, Elon Musk is, whether you like him or not, is one of the most successful entrepreneurs and visionaries of our time. He's our Alexander Graham Bell. And I don't know that it's so bad to have him have the ear of the president. I don't like the idea that he's going to be grifting the federal government out of tax dollars to subsidize his projects to go to Mars or whatever. That's kind of a bummer. On the other hand, we should go to Mars. So that is cool. And I'm all for exploration. Okay. And I know you feel that way too. A joint venture between SpaceX and NASA was not the worst thing in the world. I don't think it's so bad. On my other show with Manila Chan, the TMI show, we broke down the RFK Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again plan. And among other things, one of the big highlights is that Trump is promising to impose European Union style food safety regulations on the American food market in order to reduce processed foods and preservatives in our foods, which are making us bloated and fat and giving us cancer and other diseases. That sounds pretty good to me. I think we should talk about policy, though. I mean, for example, let's talk about foreign policy. I mean, Donald Trump seems congenitally allergic to militarism. I mean, he's not a pacifist. He ordered General Soleimani killed in Iraq. The Iranian general, and that was an assassination. Yeah. It was brutal. It was violent, but and it risked war with Iran. But he negotiated an end to the Afghan invasion and occupation that had dragged on for 20 years. Fortunately, Biden followed through, albeit not well, to say the least. And then, but I mean, good on him for that. I like the fact that he ratcheted tensions down with Little Rocket Man in North Korea by talking to him. Just that's really all the North Koreans wanted, was to be acknowledged and seen and talked to by an American president.
I don't know. That's all they wanted, because he's acting weird again. So
that's because it's been a while. He needs his hand held from time to time. But he said he's willing to talk to the Ayatollah. I like the fact that he would like to try to have better relations with Putin. And for people who don't remember, I mean, his relations with Putin soured very quickly after becoming president in 2017.
Conflicting interests. Yeah,
conflicting interests. Happen. Yeah, and also he surrounded himself with neocons. That's not going to happen this time. There's not going to be, So I think obviously the big questions are Ukraine and Israel. I'm pretty sure that he's going to let Zelensky know that he needs to sit down with Putin and hash out a peace agreement. And I think in terms of Israel, maybe now this part is pure speculation. From everything that we know overtly, he's like, have fun, do what you got to do, as he told Bibi the other day. Kill as many Palestinians as you want. We support you no matter what. And that might still be the case. But I'm speculating I'm baselessly here, but like he does, I think he wants this. I think he wants this war to come to an end. He doesn't really like wars, so I think he will be behind the scenes ask Bibi to wrap it up. Maybe that
I think he
annexation of Gaza, but wrap it up, stop the war.
Yeah, Trump seems adamantly anti-war, which is there is something that you and I can agree with.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Certainly it. Well, because I think as a businessman who is not in the munitions business, he sees it as the waste and the stupid exercise that it is. That it clouds the vision for doing actual work and actual building of things. And I think this comes from his natural inclination in business to build things rather than to destroy them. I think that's good. I think you're going to see a quick end to the Ukraine war. You're going to see Israel ratchet things down. He's made that abundantly clear. I like the new abnormal going forward. On other foreign policies, though, I mean, he is isolationist. He He's also protectionist, and the tariffs he's proposed, he kind of in a fit of peak in a rally in the last 10 days mentioned putting tariffs of 25 to 75% on goods from Mexico. That's the damage that would cause our economy. We've had tariffs as the main source and used them as weapons and used them as a way to increase um, the manufacturing base of the United States. Here's the problem, Ted. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work in the short term. Let's say he puts.
I would argue it works in the short term, but not in the long term. But go ahead.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Because don't forget, think of it in practical terms, Ted. You say, okay, we're going to put these onerous tariffs on, I don't know, microchips or something, which Biden has actually done, or try and to various degrees, but he also put federal money towards building the infrastructure. But it still takes time. Build the buildings, build the factories, train the people, find people who manufacture the equipment for those factories, much of which is built in, not here. So, and then you're talking about a decades-long process. And when we've had tariff wars, when we've had really significant increases in our tariffs in the 19th century, it has destroyed the economy and made it go into almost decades-long depressions. That's a bad thing. I think we can all agree that decade-long depressions are bad. Last one we had was a Great Depression, although the Great Recession was nothing to sneeze at. My point is that the tariffs and the isolationism I oppose. I know that you support it more than I do, but I just think that America is no longer an island. We consume products, and the people who voted for Trump, interestingly, down here in red flyover country, are going to be shocked if these tariffs become a reality when they go to Walmart and find that the bucket they bought for $2 is now going to be $20. That's the reality. That's the economic reality of what Trump is proposing. In addition, bringing it back to inside the shores, is his spending, tax cuts, and not having any plan to pay for those tax cuts. So you're going to have a federal deficit that ballooned under him, ballooned under Biden, and it's just going to continue now, and to the point where it's now, I think, 11.5% of the federal budget is spent towards servicing those bonds that pay for that debt. The economic policy of this is so unconservative and so against everything I believe. That's where I'm going to be front and center in criticizing this administration, because they're just going to do what they did before, only more so. The tax cuts, things like what he proposed. Nevada is still up in the air, but I think he'll win Nevada, and that's going to be, no tax on tips. Frankly, I think that's a good idea. How do you pay for it? That's always and Ted, it's one of the few times I almost got into a fist fight with an elected official. The mayor of Birmingham was doing all this spending. I said, how are you guys pay for this? And he was just pissed off that someone had the temerity to ask that question. Politicians hate that question, but you have to take into consideration where the federal budget is, how you're going to do this, how you're going to pay for it. And the fact of the matter is, these guys don't have any plan to pay for it other than more tax cuts, which presumably will stimulate the economy, which means more tax dollars. Unfortunately, the amount of tax cuts they're talking about, coupled with the amount of spending they're still going to continue and increase, the math doesn't add up. I feel like Stockman back in the Reagan era. The numbers don't add up. And if you remember, he was taken to the woodshed for that.
And I would also like to remind you of Dick Cheney. Deficits don't matter.
And maybe they don't. Maybe this is all pretend. A dollar is worth a dollar, Ted, because we think it's worth a dollar. There's nothing behind it. There's, we have some gold in, Fort Knox, but we don't have nearly enough to back our currency.
Well, not to mention, although we are like staring down the barrel of some imminent crises when it comes to economics. And I'm looking at you, BRICS. The BRICS alliance, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus many, many scores of other nations. They're all looking to replace the United States dollar as a reserve currency. They're looking at competing with the dollar and the euro as a reserve currency that cannot be monetized or weaponized against them by sanctions, the way that the United States started doing recently with Russia. People look at, it's interesting, right? Like it's the law of unintended consequences. Countries look at what the U.S. did to Russia and they think, oh, that could happen to me. Now, I think U.S. policymakers, they don't think of that. They think, well, everyone understands that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a special case. We wouldn't do this to, I don't know, Sudan if they invaded South Sudan. But the Sudanese don't believe that. And, it's just like, if it can happen to Russia, it can happen or any country, it can happen to you. And you just have to prepare for the worst because that's human nature. So, I think if the U.S. ceases to be as much of a reserve currency, suddenly it's going to lose a lot of its value. It's going to tank. We have the rest. We have multiple. We have 30 or 40 major economies propping up the U.S. dollar.
Well, in addition, if the isolationism goes, full on, you're going to have. I'm saying, we're looking at abbreviations. Look at Brexit. Look at what's happened to the pound. I mean, the pound is, worth almost. If you remember, the pound used to be 2.5 times. You could always do the math. There's always about 2.5 times what the U.S. dollar was. It's pretty much neck and neck now.
True.
You can't have an insular economy. It just doesn't work. We live in the real world. And you're right, Ted. If there's another currency, if there are other currencies, and there are, not to mention crypto, which I hate because I think
I hate crypto because it's environmentally fucking stupid. It's literally a feature of it that power is expensive, and literally you quote unquote mine it by having computers run all sorts of complicated calculations, and that burns up power, and that's what mines more Bitcoin. Literally, it was created as an intentional form of environmental degradation. It would be like making a car and saying, yeah, we can make this car like operate great at 40 miles a gallon. Fuck it. Let's have it go 2 miles per gallon just because. I mean, literally, it's literally, there's never been a bigger fucking waste of power and energy than crypto.
Well, it's also, it's cryptic, and I've always felt that as someone who loves economics, I never quite understood it because it's a fiction. Here's a quick story.
All money is a fiction, but that's really a fiction.
That's really a fiction. The American dollar is a fiction, but here's a fiction. Why is platinum worth more than gold, Ted?
No.
Do you know the answer to this?
Shinier? Silverier?
It's not. People's first response is because there's less of it. And that's not true. There's plenty of platinum. We think platinum is worth more than gold because
we think it is.
We think it is. That's it. There is no other practical reason to believe that platinum is worth more than gold. However, in our minds, it is. It's the same with crypto. It's the same with the American dollar. It's the same with the pound, the euro, you name it. So going forward, you have to go with economics 101, and I think we could potentially be looking at a catastrophic economic decisions going forward after January 20th, when President-elect Trump is sworn back in. And I that's, to me, is danger number one. I like, getting to your point earlier, I like the fact that he is anti-war. I'm anti-war. War is dumb.
Being anti-war is it almost erases all the other shitty things about him. I mean, I didn't vote for him, and I wouldn't. But I mean, we've never had a major American politician be so anti-war. I mean, George McGovern wasn't as anti-war as this.
Woodrow Wilson was. He kept us out of war.
Oh, right.
Until he didn't. Yeah,
I'm trying to think of maybe Grant, maybe? I mean, you have to go way back.
Yeah, Grant, he surreptitiously sent troops west to quash the nagging, those nasty people who had the temerity to be occupying land we wanted.
True.
He wasn't real shy about that. But
you get my point, though. I mean, like, to have an American president who is this anti-war, it's a blessing. It's not a curse. It's a beautiful thing, really.
I hope he follows through, and that the neocons don't weasel their way in and do. We get another
if
preemptive
we
wars,
have to have camps,
bullshittery.
if we have to have fascist camps, can we have it for them? I could see.
Neither you nor I have any influence on this, Ted. Neither you nor I. We're going to be in those camps.
That's true. That is true. And and we will be harsh critics of this president, as we have been of the current president. I mean, because that's what we do, and we're trying to hold our leaders' feet to the fire to try to get us to have them be the best that they can be, so that we can be the best that we can be. Let's talk a little bit about
before we tie this up. Yeah, let's. We're getting close to needing to tie this up.
Yeah, we do need to tie this up. And I guess the question, my next question for you is, Donald Trump will be the oldest person to ever assume the oath of office in U.S. history. He'll be older than Joe Biden was on January 20th, 2021. We know what happens there. He was, basically senile when he took the oath of office, and it just got worse. And obviously, he wasn't able to run again. Most recently, my favorite Biden quote was, he said that Gaza was a really important part of Delaware. It's
a vital part of Delaware.
So okay then. Anyway, look, anybody who argues that there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden is obviously just not to be listened to anymore and should be taken seriously by serious people. But JD Vance, Usha and JD are like whispering to each other in the night, and they're like,
yeah,
Donald's getting old, and 25th Amendment.
Oh, yeah.
How long do we wait till we pull it on him? I mean, does Trump finish his term?
No.
Does he drop dead? Or does Vance just decide at a certain point, this guy's crazy, and 25th him, considering the fact that, he is crazy?
I don't know that he can 25th. I mean, that flies in the face of his supporters, his Donald Trump supporters, and they go ape shit. I mean, even if it's empirically obvious that the guy's lost his mind, I do think that he has cognitive. I mean, we're going to be as hard on Trump as we were on Biden. This guy, we're going to swear in a guy who's on if not senile, certainly on the heel, on the cusp of it.
Mm-hmm.
And being on the cusp of senility means you're going to be senile. This isn't in America, and in human beings, that's what happens. So 2 years from now, when he comes into the Oval Office not wearing pants, and holding a statue of Taylor Swift saying, "This okay, Vice President Vance, to go charge the parapets." It's at that point, the 25th is tough, and his cabinet is not going to. I think they're going to be scared to death even if it's the right thing to do. But his health is terrible. I mean, no one wants. No one knows.
JD Vance is a canny and ambitious, ruthless motherfucker. I wouldn't.
Ruthless is right.
I would not put anything past that guy.
We will see a President Vance, and his delivery, which is so sweet and so nice, and so we're opening these.
As Trump famously said, "Oh, those eyes."
Yeah, well, he's not. I mean,
he's not wrong.
The debate showed that that JD Vance is. As you said, he's canny, he's ruthless, and he's the worst kind of canny ruthless, in that it's going to be sugar coated, and you're going to go, "Oh, I can't say no to that guy. Okay, I'll get on the train."
Finally, I want to wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. I want to wrap it up with a final thought. So in 1988, a book called Generations was published by two demographers named William Strauss and Neil Howe. And they basically have a theory of generational cycles in which generations like Generation X, there's cycles of 4. Basically, there's an A generation, like the boomers, a big generation. Then Gen X is a B generation, actually. Then the children of the boomers are a C generation. That would be the millennials. They're privileged and kind of worthless. Then there's the D generation, which is like the Zoomers, which are the children of the Gen Xers, who are incredibly underprivileged, but insanely interesting and cool, and have to deal with a major American crisis. They predicted in 1988 that in or around the year 2028, America would face a crisis on the scale of the Civil War, and that Generation X, like all generations like before it, would not be allowed to have a president of the United States. Kamala Harris, if she had been elected, would have been the first Gen X president. So
Wow.
does this mean that Gen X has missed its chance to have a president?
No, because we seem to like to elect old people. I mean, that seems to be what we do now. I mean, think about. I mean, Kamala Harris turned 60 during the campaign. I mean, and she was the young one. I mean, that's bizarre. I mean, J.D. Vance, as you mentioned, he's 39 years old. That's young. That's young for federal office, of course. Yeah, they say I think he'll be the youngest or one among the youngest vice presidents we've ever had.
For sure.
When he does ascend to the presidency, he will be. Now, is he Gen X?
He's millennial.
Yeah. I mean, so Gen X has missed its chance. I'm sorry, Ted. You're not going to be president.
I got to say, Messieurs Strauss and Howe were right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to us here on the DMZ America podcast. Coming to you from the left, I'm Ted Rall. Scott Stantis is over there on the right. Thanks for coming in early. Thanks for listening to us. And we'll be back in a couple of days with, more. Obviously, we'll know more about the House of Representatives, and we'll have probably a better sense of what the political layout of the land is looking like in terms of the blame game and so on. You can check out my stuff at rawl.com. You can go to whowhatwhy.org. The TMI show with me and Manila Chan airs live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., but you can also stream it after the fact. Go to gocomics.com/Ted Rall, and also check me and Scott out on Center Clip, which is 30-second to 5-minute podcasts. Scott, let's hear your stuff.
Well, you can go to gocomics.com/Scott Stantis, go to gocomics.com/Prickly City. You can go to the Chicago Tribune, see the work I do for them, the Dallas Morning News, the work I do for them, and Smirkonish.com, the work I do for Michael Smirkonish and CNN. So there's everything you need to know, folks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care and hang in there. And Paul Trump. No. Okay. Bye.
Oh, God. Jesus.